veteran member of the movement for democratic change, as Mugabe again outmaneuvered his opponents. David Coltart, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
If you had been able to foresee in September 2008, when the global political agreement between the opposition forces and Mugabe's ZANU-PF was drawn up, if you could have foreseen what would happen over the next almost 2 years, would you have backed away from that agreement?
No, I would not have. One can't divorce the current from the past. And at the time we entered into this agreement, Zimbabwe faced complete degeneration into Somalia or Liberia. To that extent, we had very stark options then. And even if you look at the current situation, in that context, things are much better now than they were 2 years ago. So I don't regret it. I think that part of the problem is that people have had unrealistic expectations. I always had much lower expectations than certainly people in the international community.
Well, we'll talk about that, but I'm struck by this phrase, things are much better. Do you really mean they're much better, or they are more stable? Because if they're just more stable, in a way, all you've done is give Mugabe a new lease of life, when, as you say, his system was very close to collapse.
I think that they are objectively much better. There are certain areas where they are worse. The situation on farms is far worse. There are ongoing land invasions. But there are less people being tortured, less people disappeared. People have got money that they can spend. The schools are open now. The hospitals are open and at least have some drugs in them. And even regarding human rights issues, we have a new independent daily newspaper. We have a new electoral commission. The constitutional process, although it's greatly delayed, has at last started. And so there are prospects of improvement.
I want to get to quite a lot of that detail in a minute, but before we get there, what's it like personally, sitting in a government which in the end has as its executive head a president, Robert Mugabe, whom for many years you've been a staunch opponent, critic, in a sense an enemy of. You have to sit there, you have to go to official functions where he is your president, and does that stick in your throat?
Well, we've had a very checkered history together going back 30 years. In 1998, he declared me an enemy of the state. In 2003, there's no doubt that his agents tried to assassinate me. So I've come into the relationship with that history, and it hasn't always been easy. It's been, in many respects, a tense relationship, and to that extent, it does stick in one's throat. However, as I said just now, what applies nationally applies personally. We had no other viable, non-violent option other than to go into this arrangement. And to that extent, we have to put history aside and work in the best interests of the nation. And that includes working with Robert Mugabe.
Right, but you are telling me that you believe that his regime, operating under his orders, tried to kill you. You now serve in a government which in the end has to be loyal to him as president. Do you trust him?
It's very hard to trust anyone who's been responsible for gross human rights violations. But let me use a local analogy, that of the Good Friday Agreement. If people in Ireland said that they weren't going to enter into an agreement because of what the IRA or any other paramilitary group had done in the past, there would never have been a Good Friday Agreement, and Northern Ireland would be stuck in the mire still. We came to the same point in our history, and you've got to put the past aside in many respects to move ahead.
Let's now look at the point of that agreement. You say it was basically to rescue the nation from the cataclysm. But more specifically, the point was, as I understand it, from the opposition point of view, to join the government so that you could create a stable platform to give Zimbabwe a new political start. There would be space and room to develop a new constitution. a new framework so that elections could then be held on a free and fair basis, and the Zimbabwean people could finally, truly express their political desires. You're nowhere near that, are you? You know, there is this constitutional process you're supposed to have started, but I just look at what people are saying about it, the consultation with the public, which according to many local people is nothing more than a charade.
Well, in many respects that is true. The constitutional reform process was meant to last 18 months and was meant to start when the inclusive government was formed in February last year.
And it's only just started, and now it's supposed to last for 60 days.
It's greatly delayed. But the point is that we have finally got it underway. There is a process of outreach, of consultation taking place. Well, I think that it's too early to judge whether it's a fig leaf. It may be a fig leaf, but I think that this is where the international community have to give it a chance. There are people of great integrity involved in the process. Bear in mind that Zimbabweans have debated the constitution intensively for 10 years, and there's some very interesting things coming out of this outreach program. So let's not judge it now.
To be plain about it, ZANU-PF say there is already a draft that they regard as completely acceptable. It's been there for 3 years, and it clearly is designed to give the executive president an enormous amount of power. ZANU-PF insists that whatever talk of term limits there is, they will not apply to Mugabe, and he can and will run for re-election again. Is that acceptable to you?
Well, it's certainly not acceptable. But of course,
there's a lot. That's the basis of ZANU-PF's
But once
position.
again, it's too early to judge whether that will be the content of the final constitution. Inevitably, there's going to be some haggling and some exchange, and I'm sure that the final constitution will not be entirely to my liking. But I think it will have to be a lot better than the existing constitution to pass both domestic muster and regional muster.